Production funding for Living Smart with Patricia Gras is underwritten in part by Halliburton.
Lyme disease, the mysterious chronic debilitating illness, may be affecting many more Americans than now believed. Find out what you can do to get better. Next on Living Smart.
Hello, I'm Patricia Gras. Welcome to Living Smart, the show designed to help you get the most out of life. Today's guest, Kathleen Zabawa, is the researcher and secretary of a local Lyme disease support group. A chronic Lyme patient herself, she will share how she's dependent on her faith, extensive research, and a great attitude to survive this mysterious and debilitating illness. Have a pen and paper ready. We'll be giving you a list of resources at the end of the program.
She was only a little girl, we knew, but we'll never forget her eyes, nor the pleading way she tried to touch, or how she refused to cry. Did you get that snapdragon? Mm-hmm. The one in the middle needs some too.
My most important lessons I've learned from my mother are to have faith in God, to never give up, and to be very persistent.
Hey, blue girl's fixing to bloom, Serena.
Really?
Yes.
Awesome, my favorite rose.
Kathleen Zabawa loves her home garden.
Make sure you get it by the root, guys.
She and her family work on it as often as they can. But as much as they love doing this, being outdoors may have led them to a chronic and debilitating illness.
Okay, I'm starting to hurt. I gotta quit.
Okay, well, go ahead and sit down, Mom.
An infectious disease that keeps her bedridden most of the time, and that Kathleen found out about by chance when she called the hospital hotline.
The nurse that I happened to get that day worked in a Lyme doctor's office. And if you know anything about Lyme disease, the one thing you know is that there are very, very, very few doctors that treat it, that believe in it, and that are willing to treat it, because the doctors are targeted by the insurance companies, and then they give them a hard time.
For decades, doctors believe a tiny deer tick transmitted the bacteria, Borrelia burgdorferi, that causes Lyme disease. Today, more and more doctors believe sexual and congenital transmission may be spreading the disease as well.
She said, go get tested, and I did. I talked my doctor into seeing me. He ran the test. He didn't want to, and I said, do it anyway, just humor me. So he did. And he called me back 3 days later, and he said, well, I'll be damned, you've got it.
This after a lifetime of chronic health problems, fatigue, arthritis, and pain that began since she can remember.
I can catch up on my 1,700 emails I have.
The early symptoms may include a skin rash, fever, and flu-like symptoms. Eventually, arthritic and neurological conditions may present themselves. In most advanced cases, the disease is difficult to treat because of the nature of the spirochete bacteria.
It's extremely smart. And it hides, and it changes form. As soon as you take antibiotics, it turns into a cyst. It rolls itself up in a little ball and coats itself with a protein that the antibiotic can't get to.
Kathleen got better after 2.5 years of intravenous antibiotics.
Ibuprofen in there.
But the treatment was discontinued after her insurance company said she was cured.
They pulled my antibiotics, the intravenous ones, right before Christmas, and I went down fast. It was like, literally like pulling the drain plug in the bathtub. That's how fast I went down.
And then I started getting joint pain in my knees real bad, and in my feet, my ankles and that. And then that's when it just started slowly progressing.
Once her children were tested, 3 of them came up positive. And that's when Kathleen joined and became the secretary of this Lyme support group.
I had a positive on both of them the regular way, and they still pulled the plug on mine.
Not all doctors agree there's a late-stage Lyme disease, and because it is so hard to detect and treat, there's a lack of consensus among medical boards, insurance companies, and doctors as to what to do.
But they're going to use methadone this time, which is what I'm taking orally, and is working. It's really hard to find something. It's like trying to treat cancer pain.
So support groups like this one are springing up all over the country to find a solution to the controversy answers to their questions, and Lyme-literate doctors who will treat them.
Believe how bad it hurts. No.
You wake up crying in the middle of the night.
It helped us to know we weren't alone, and it sounds so stupid, really, but it really does make a difference.
And we've been going to doctors since then. They've been saying the same old thing. Oh, we don't have Lyme in Texas.
You go to all these doctors and you tell them what's wrong with you, and they're so not related to each other that you get sent to all these different specialists, and they wind up thinking you're crazy because... And then you plug in the missing piece of the puzzle, which is Lyme, and it all makes sense.
Wands. Whose is this? Is that Sarah's?
Yes, and this is Tristan's.
Doctors recently diagnosed that Kathleen's oldest daughter, Serena, also has Lyme disease.
Doctor, the one that's treating my children, told her she can't work. She's got severe colitis and can't hold down a job.
You can put these up.
They want you to count how many there are there. Can you count those for me?
And
then write that number.
Serena, like her little brothers and sister, was homeschooled, did well and went to college, but not before having problems in public school, brought on by dyslexia. Within a few months of homeschooling, Kathleen had Serena back on track.
That's an S. Start the other way. This way, remember?
Today, the disease that has devastated this family brings it closer together.
He can fly. Here.
Tristan, it's okay, baby.
Can I put him on you, soda?
Kathleen has been happily married for 31 years.
Medical info or Lyme?
Well, okay, look under medical info.
I don't see it on Lyme.
And soon she and Serena plan to start a home-based business to help others cope with serious health problems.
Okay. Do you want me to put it back underneath Lyme? Or
No, that's fine. We're going to be medical coordinators.
Is that all you needed?
Mm-hmm. I've taken care of my dad for 3 years, and I took care of my father-in-law when he broke his hip, and I've taken care of other elderly people. And I've also dealt with a lot of chronically ill people in the Lyme support group. Hello?
Advocate, survivor, wife, mother, and entrepreneur.
The support is probably one of the key components to getting better.
Kathleen also writes a monthly internet column about Lyme disease.
She was only a little girl, we knew, but we'll never forget her eyes, nor the pleading way she tried to touch, or how she refused to cry.
She also writes poetry, an activity that's helped her cope first with her traumatic childhood and now with her disease.
As she told us these stories, our eyes began to wander. I was molested by my father and his father, and my mother was extremely physically abusive. She used her fist. She didn't slap you. And I was sick a lot. She spoke as if she knew the cause.
The writings reflect how much she's had to overcome.
When backs were turned and doors were closed, when the lights were all turned off, my hell began and would not end until prices were paid and lost.
And forgive us our trespasses.
Today, Kathleen, surrounded by symbols of her religion, the family she loves, and forgiveness in her heart, credits her unwavering faith and family for keeping her upbeat and hopeful.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. My faith is extremely important to me. I've had so many miracles happen that just people call me up and say, Kathy, will you pray for me? because they're answered. My best friend called me and asked me to pray for her to get this house that she saw that she wanted. And they were in dire straits and no money. And 6 months later, they were living in the house. They bought it. You guys need to go in the living room now so I can go finish my stuff. Come on.
Though she prays for a miracle to heal her children and herself, she remains proactive in her quest for a solution to a disease that wreaks havoc in so many lives.
Seriously.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for being with us.
Thank
we
you
appreciate
for
you coming
asking.
here. I'm going to start with the basics. What is Lyme disease?
Supposedly a tick-borne illness, but we're finding now more and more that it's transmitted like AIDS, basically. Okay. It's a blood-borne illness, so it's sexually transmitted, and it's passed from mother to child, which means that it's probably in our blood supply as well.
That's still very controversial, and
yes.
some mainstream doctors deny that. But it is also called the great imitator.
It is confused with fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or tension headaches, all these sort of syndromes that we don't know where they're coming from. What can you tell me about that? What's the link?
It causes so many different symptoms that you're diagnosed with numerous. The most common misdiagnoses are lupus, which I was tested for numerous times, multiple sclerosis,
right,
which Teresa, the leader of our Lyme group, was misdiagnosed with, the chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Those are the most common ones. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's also are, we're finding now, a misdiagnosis for Lyme disease.
There was recently a study on Alzheimer's patients that found that they had the bacteria, correct?
It was Alzheimer's and Parkinson's patients, and they did slides of the brains after, they were dead, autopsy, and they found Lyme in 80 to 90% of the brains.
Kathleen, the symptoms, we could be here all day describing the advanced chronic Lyme symptoms. Tell me the most important ones, and I know neurological are the most serious symptoms when you have chronic Lyme.
And everybody has those.
Everybody has those. What are some of the other symptoms? Because I know that you have to have a minimum amount of symptoms to get a clinical diagnosis.
I guess probably the most prominent one and the one that sticks out the most is going to be the pain issue. Mine takes the form of rheumatoid arthritis, but fibromyalgia, which is a misdiagnosis, it causes pain all over and there's no visible evidence of it.
Right.
And so those are probably the easiest ones to see. But the neurological ones are the ones that nobody sees, that you don't really notice unless you're the person experiencing it, like word retrieval. I used to be extremely articulate. I could think.
You still are.
Really fast on my feet.
Right.
I can't do that anymore.
Right.
My husband can talk circles around me, and he can't. It's hard for him to order at Burger King.
Right.
So it's gotten hard.
Right.
Your memory is gone. You have like a brain fog. It feels like your head's stuffed with cotton. There's just.
It just comes and goes.
Yes.
Another thing that you told me is that the pain moves around. Tell me about that, because I know you're dealing with that on a daily basis.
I went to the emergency room one time for my shoulder, the first time that the shoulder pain hit. And I thought that I had dislocated it, actually, or broken it. I didn't know how, because it hurt so bad. I went, and they gave me a shot of morphine, and it didn't even touch it. And then the next morning, it was like gone. And it was hurting so bad the night before, it felt like somebody had ripped it off and put it back on wrong.
Now, who's at risk of contracting this? I know that if you camp a lot, watch out. How do you protect yourself? Because what we do know for sure is that a tick bite can possibly give you Lyme disease. The other transmissions, it's still very controversial.
They found it in 18% of the mosquito population.
So there are other so really basically, to start out with, when you go camping, use DEET to protect yourself on what?
Yeah, but you have to be careful with the DEET too, because that can cause neurological symptoms and it's dangerous. So you need to put the DEET on your clothes and not on your skin.
Okay, that's important to know.
Yes, especially with children, but even adults have problems with it. And just wear long pants, long sleeves, and make sure that I put rubber bands around the bottoms of our pants so that they can't get up inside.
And once you have a tick bite, let's say some people get the rash. It's sort of a round rash, but not all of them get the rash.
It's really rare, actually.
Right. It's rare to
we
see
don't
the
know
rash.
many people that, yeah.
Okay, so you should always check yourself after you go on a camping trip if you've had a tick bite.
I don't know if you remember when you were a kid and you went camping, what was the first thing your parents did when you got home? They checked you all over for ticks.
That's
my grandma and grandpa did that. That's normal. The older generation knows how dangerous ticks are. The younger one,
they don't know, so we're paying for it. Why is it so hard to diagnose this, do you think? I know there are 300 strains of bacteria, the spirochete bacteria.
That's part of it, but the biggest part is that it's, like I said, it's an extremely smart organism. Syphilis, which it's related to, and was called the great imitator, had 22 chromosomes in its gene. The genetic makeup of Lyme disease has over 200.
It's amazing. So it's really hard to detect.
It's extremely smart.
And it's hard to also diagnose because the testing is not very. Tell me about the testing.
There's
What
no
laboratory
test that actually is
accurate.
reliable. The best one is the Hygienics, the Western blot from Hygienics, but it's still basically a clinical diagnosis. It has to be because most people test negative.
Right. Just because it tests negative doesn't mean you have the bacteria sometimes. What about the test? They're not very reliable. So you're saying a doctor needs to do a clinical diagnosis. What does that mean exactly?
Well, that's how they diagnose most illnesses, really. When you think about it, there's no test for a cold. They know you have it.
Right, right. We know that there are very few Lyme literate doctors in Texas. Even in the United States, I don't think there's more than 100.
Yeah,
and there is more than 100.
Not. No,
probably not. And Lyme literate doctors tend to have Lyme themselves. Why is that?
They're willing to treat it because they know how devastating it is. If you're not touched by it, you don't want to know about it. You don't want to have anything to do with it. And they're targeted, like I said. A lot of them have lost their licenses. And there are 3 or 4 right now that are in the process of probably losing their license.
And is it because they're prescribing too many antibiotics?
Prescribing antibiotics, which is stupid because they give you antibiotics for acne for years. But heaven forbid you should get it for something serious like this. A month's worth of antibiotics and we're cured. That's what all of the doctors say. And I'd like them to come to our support group meeting and look at these people, look at them in their eyes and tell them they're not sick and hurting. They can't even walk.
And there's a difference, though, between the people who get Lyme disease, who have the acute symptoms when it first happens, and the people like you who find out many, many years later the bacteria has been in your body for a very long time, and then you have the chronic problems that are so hard to treat. And there is a controversy as to how much antibiotics you should be taking. You had taken 2 years and you were doing much better. But then they said no more.
I was cured.
Why is it, do you think, that the insurance companies don't want to deal with this?
Well, probably money.
Money. Well, it's always a problem, isn't it?
It costs a lot of money.
And do you have any plans to protect the doctors that are treating Lyme disease?
I think we're trying. There's a grassroots support organization trying to get legislation passed in Texas to protect the doctors from being persecuted and prosecuted. There's 2 states I know of that have passed laws already to protect their doctors. And the doctors are still being targeted in those states.
And just because they're prescribing too many antibiotics. Tell me about co-infections, because that seems to be another complication when you have Lyme disease.
The tick, when you test a tick, they carry numerous different organisms. The most common co-infections, and almost always you have those, is the Ehrlichia, which can be deadly if not treated.
What is that, Ehrlichia?
It's an
infectious disease?
Exactly, and it causes symptoms just like Lyme, so it's kind of hard to differentiate.
Is it treated the same way, though, with antibiotics, or they don't know?
Different antibiotics work for the Ehrlichia. You have to take an antibiotic for each separate one.
Right.
Like the Babesia is, I think that's a protozoan. And then we've got...
it's a fungus?
Like similar to malaria.
Okay.
And then we've got the other one, which starts with a B, and I'm having a Lyme brain.
So there are other co-infections that are...
here.
That's okay. I understand perfectly.
Bartonella.
Bartonella, that's right. What do you think is important to join a support group? You talk about how you were feeling completely alone when you found out about this, and why is it important to have other people to share this with? Do you feel like people think you're crazy, and you're exaggerating, you're creating hysteria over this, and it's all in your head?
My kids thought I was like that. You know, especially my sons. You know how men are. And I know they love me, but they thought Mom was a hypochondriac and hysterical and over sensitive and high strung, and I wasn't. I was sick, and they didn't know. Now they do. but it even took a while after it was diagnosed for them to take it serious.
What do you think needs to change that people with chronic Lyme disease or advanced Lyme disease can get the help they need without the persecution or without being labeled crazy?
Probably publicity.
Really? I mean, don't you think the mainstream media covers this enough?
No.
Not at all?
Years ago, say probably 8, 9 years ago, you read it in all the magazines. It was article at least 3 or 4 times a year. It was on TV all the time. You heard it mentioned. How often do you hear it mentioned now?
Yeah, it's like a little secret.
Yeah.
What is the first thing that people who think they might have Lyme disease just by listening to the symptoms and looking into the symptoms, what is the first step you would advise them to do? Because I know a lot of people go to the regular doctor and they're told there's no Lyme in Texas or there's no Lyme in California. Or
no matter where you are, that's what they say.
Okay. So to avoid that pain, because I'm sure it's very painful to have a disease like this and to have people who don't understand it, what is the first step they should take?
Probably contact, get on the internet and do research.
Like you did?
Yes, and find out what you're up against and arm yourself with knowledge so that when you go to the doctor's office, you know what you're talking about and he can't talk circles around you.
Well, what should you keep in mind when you visit a doctor, a regular doctor, when it comes to Lyme disease?
That you know something's wrong with you and you're not going to quit till you find out.
Why do you think also that Lyme disease is underreported? Because we hear the CDC says 24,000 cases, but they even admit it might be 10 times more than that. It might be 250,000.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, they actually said in one article that I read yesterday, they think a couple of 100,000 a year. A year.
That's a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about alternatives. I know people have done studies on Lyme disease, for example, in cat's claw, from what I've read. What do you know about that? What are the most common alternative medicines that are being used to help you along with this?
I think the most common one right now is the salt and vitamin C one, which they've had some success with, I think, but it's limited and it's dangerous if you don't do it right. Because a lot of people just take it and they don't follow the program, and there's supplements that you have to take with that much salt and vitamin C.
You have to know what
it
you're
can be
doing.
Dangerous if you don't do it right.
And cat's claw is also very commonly used for this?
It doesn't do anything.
So you haven't found that
No.
in your experience that it's done anything. What do you think is the most difficult part of living with this disease, besides the pain?
Mm-hmm. Like I said before, we talked about this before, my watching my family have to deal with it. And you know how painful it is to watch someone you love hurt? It's worse than hurting yourself. So I feel bad for them that they have to deal with that and watch me, because it's painful.
How close are you to finding some relief for your children?
They're actually getting worse. And they're on antibiotics, but I think the problem is probably going to be the same thing that I have, an absorption problem with the oral antibiotics, which we've just recently found out there's a test we're going to have done that tests our genetic, called the genome or something like that, and it tells you why and what you're supposed to take and why it doesn't work. Teresa had it done, and it was really eye-opening.
So it's more accurate as to what you need to do.
Mm-hmm. And it'll explain why the antibiotics, the oral ones, don't work.
Tell me, Kathleen, how do you know that you're living smart?
Well, I don't really. But
you think you are, right?
Yeah, I fake it really well. Like research, doing a lot of research, continuing that, staying with the support group, and keeping a good attitude, laughing. Like I told you, I was going to write a book about it, and I was going to name it Ow, because that's what I say all the time is ow, ow. and it's an irreverent look at Lyme, but you have a choice. You either laugh or cry. And I'd rather laugh.
Right. You keep your humor up, and you keep your kids' humor up. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Courage. You can reach Kathleen Zabawa at 281-733-5138. That's 281-733-5138. And for more information on Lyme disease, you can visit the Lyme Disease Network website, and that's LYME.net. That's lymenet.org. And the International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society website at ilads.org, and that's ILADS.org, to find professionals who treat chronic Lyme disease. Please remember to visit our website, houstonpbs.org/livingsmart, for a complete resource list, and feel free to share your own views on living with Lyme disease. You can call us with your comments at 713-743-8513, or email livingsmart@houstonpbs.org. And that's our show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. Remember to live smart and tune in to our next episode with entrepreneur and philanthropist Michael Holthouse. Learn why and how he wants to prepare all the at-risk middle school children for a brighter future. I'm Patricia Gras. Have a fabulous week.